Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create this type of soft, milky architecture diagram. Kind of has like this very soft aesthetic. So we'll take something that looks typical in shaded view, and we're going to alter the rendered view, and we'll make it look like this. And so it's very easy, and hopefully we can get through this pretty quickly. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to type in options, right? And we're going to go down to view. So we'll go down to your view over here, right? And then I'll just click here, go to display. You can click on your display modes. And on rendered, right? If you don't want to alter the default rendered, you can make a copy of it, okay? So if I click copy, right, it's going to by default go down here and we can rename it. So I'm just going to rename it like soft render, okay? And then I'm actually going to click OK, right? And then I'm going to right click on my view and I'm going to go to soft render right here. Okay. I already did these options, but I just want to show you and I'll mark it up for you. So then we go back and type options again. And I'm going to go down to the new view I made. And I'm going to mark the options that I altered, okay? So first off, for background, I made it a solid color and I made it white, okay? So I made solid color and I made it white. For ground plane settings, I did custom, and it's your options. If you want to have shadow only, it doesn't really matter, to be honest. You can have this off if you wanted to. It doesn't really matter. So keep that. You can keep that default. Shade objects for sure. Rendering material for sure, obviously, because we're going to do this rendered view. Back face setting, you want to use the front face setting. Now, the visibility, this is subjective depending on what you want to show, but you actually don't want to have a lot of things checked here. You just want to have your surface edges for sure. Curves is optional, okay? Let me scroll down. So surface edges, curves is optional, and I'll show you why. In my scenario, I'm definitely going to keep it on, and I'm going to show you why later in the video. Clipping planes is optional. Text is optional if you want to display your text on here. Annotations is optional. Points is optional. But for sure, surface edges, and for me personally, for sure curves. Now, very important, if you go down to scene lighting, you can do scene lighting or you can do ambient occlusion, doesn't really matter. I would prefer to do ambient occlusion, it makes it softer, but what's more important is actually the ambient color. The ambient color, you actually want to change it to this like dark gray. Instead of black, make it a dark gray, okay? That's very important because that'll actually alter the look and shade. So if you see this here, if I change this to black right now, you see how it got much darker? So we want to make this a dark gray. Important, okay? It softens it up. So if I click on, now there's categories here. I want to first go to my objects and modify that, okay? So the first thing on my objects, I'm going to go to curves, right? And on curves, I want to use objects color and use objects width and keep the scale at 1. This is important. I'll show you why again later in the video. Surfaces. So basically, this is like all of the line edges that you see on your surfaces. So the line edges, I want it to be like this gray. I don't want it to be black. I want it to be like this dark gray tone. And the same thing with naked edges. I want to do this dark gray tone. I say use single color for all edges. Width usage. Okay, this is subjective. You can either use the objects width or you can use pixels. If you use the objects width, that means you're going to use the layer's default print width, right? So if it's hairline, it's going to be hairline. If it's 0.5, it's going to be 0.5. Okay? So if you do pixels, I would just keep it at 1. Only at 1. If you do objects width, then I also prefer keeping it at default because you don't want the line work to pop out too much and look distracting. So on the safe side, you can just keep the pixels at 1 if you wanted to. The pixel width of 1. And if you do object width, then just make sure you keep it default, which is, I think, hairline. Okay? Now, let's go. No need for sub Ds unless you have sub Ds. It's going to be the same thing when you show the edges of the sub Ds on lines. Meshes, again, I don't do it on meshes. I just do it on surfaces. But you can do the same settings in meshes on the outer edges of the meshes. Lights you can ignore. Clipping planes you can ignore. Shadows, very important. Okay. So you can keep all your settings on medium if you want to, all right? Honestly, some of these you can actually make low and it won't affect it, but on the safe side, you can just keep everything on the medium settings on these. I keep my shadow color here actually black. If you make it gray, it actually gets much, much lighter. So I actually keep my shadow color black here. All right? And that's all for your render settings. And you can actually like duplicate these to other, like you can duplicate this on the monochrome settings or on the technical settings. It might look a little different, I'll show you. But in general, that's all you have to do for your settings. All right? So if we just do okay, right? Now, the next thing is how you show these elements, okay? So like what I do is I actually make a material for each item, right? So like for example, I make a custom material. So if I zoom out of it, you see like this is a custom material. This is a custom material. And my basic custom material is just a color and a transparency and a gloss. That's all I'm doing. So I just make, I go here, click the plus sign, do custom, right? And then once you get your custom material, right, I just give it a color. I like to keep my colors more on the pastel, lighter side. Not really light. So I actually wouldn't go, if I click on the colors, I wouldn't go beyond 90%. So not like 89% and below is the color range you want to work with, okay? If you start going 90 and above, it's hard to read the actual color and the actual hue. So right now, like you see, I'm just doing the default pink that's on Rhino, right? And then I give it a gloss finish of 5 and a reflectivity finish of 5. I would go between 5 and like 30% for these, okay? So you toggle around with how much reflectivity you want with it. It's only going to really read in like curved surfaces. On flat surfaces, it's not going to read that much. But on curved surfaces, your gloss and your reflectivity is going to read substantially. Transparency, I would go between 15% and 50%. Right now, I have it at 35% because it's a sweet spot, okay? So that's all for my material settings. And so like each time I want to show a different color, right, I'll just like go and I'll duplicate this material, right? And maybe like I want to show like a different color, maybe I'll call it like custom 5 or whatever, like whatever color you want to, or whatever name you want to call it. And then maybe I want to be like a brown or something, right? So that's all I do. But it's really important to understand, like I'm making a layer for each color that I want to call out in my diagram. So like this is a lighter shade than this, you see? Because I want there to be a hierarchy in like my process of diagram. And like this like surface is a different shade than that, right? So you see how you kind of get like this gloss reflectivity, it's like this like smooth milky look, right? Same thing here. There's kind of like smooth milkiness to it, I guess. I don't know how to describe it, but that's the first thing that comes to mind. Another important thing is your print display. So right now I actually have my print display on. If you type in print display, right? Let me show you something. Right now the state is on. So this gives you like an approximation of how like the final image will look if you printed it. If I take it off, I want to show you how it looks. Right? And I do off. You see? It's much, I guess, darker. It's a little bit thicker, right? So if you want to see like the final approximation of how it'll look, I do state on and I do color display. I don't do color print. I do color display. And I just press enter, right? And that's going to give you a really good approximation of how it will look, whether you did view capture the file or if you did control P for print, okay? Now, this is the important part when it comes to the curve. So remember how I said I want to keep my curves displayed, right? I make a separate layer called outline. So like let's say you want like that thick black outline, around the diagrams that we typically see, I make a separate layer called outline, and I actually change the line weight like to, I didn't change it here, but I would change it to like maybe 0.35 or 0.5, around there, okay? And what I would do is, let me show you. I do a command called mesh outline, okay? And I select the object I want to create a mesh outline for, and I press enter. So what it does, you can't see because my background's white, but what it does is it creates a complete outline around your object. And so I already have this active, so it's on that layer. But this is really important. You can only do it in the view you have it saved. So you cannot orbit out of the view. If you orbit out of the view, you see, you lose it. So you need to make sure you have your view saved before you do this command, okay? Let me just do it again. You go here and just do mesh outline. So it's there, it's active on this. Okay, now you have two options to take, or actually three options to take this into an actual file. You can print it, so I do Control P, right? I can set up, so you see how I get that black edge right here? You see that? So I can print it, right? That's an option. So I'm doing raster output, print display color, right? A Rhino PDF, high resolution, line type, match viewport display. I'm not doing match pattern definition. Match viewport display. I'm not scaling up my line weights at all. Background color is up to you. Don't worry about the white background. I'll tell you how to get around that. But that's option number one. You can just print it as a PDF, And again, do not worry about the white background. I'll show you how to handle it. So that's option one. You can just do print it OK, right? The other option is I can do view capture to file, okay? Now, when you do view capture to file, there's two categories that's important to watch out for, is your transparent background and your resolution, okay? If you do transparent background, the color is going to be a little bit more muted because it's going to assume there's no white, no solid color behind there. So if you have any kind of transparency to your diagram, like what I have a slight transparency to this. Like this actual massing has a slight transparency to it. So behind it, if it's a solid white, it's going to look different, right? This, right now, it's transparent, so the color is going to be a little bit more muted, but it's not that big of a deal. However, if you want to be very precise and like you literally want to get what you see, then don't have transparent background checked and just save it you can still save it as a PNG. Resolution. So what I do is, the first thing I do is I do viewport, right? And then I do custom, so that it locks in the aspect ratio. And I make sure I lock my aspect ratio and I bump it up. I bump it up to like 4,000. But yeah, so you can do 4,000 or, just a high resolution so you can downscale it. And then you do OK and just make sure that you save your file as a PNG, okay? And I'll show you how you can start laying out in Illustrator. And again, do not worry about the white background. I'll show you how to handle it. You don't even have to take it to Photoshop. There's no need to take it to Photoshop. I'll show you how you can just get rid of it in whether it's in Illustrator or in InDesign. So you just press OK and just make sure that you save it as like a PNG, okay? And that's it. So I'm going to go to InDesign and I'm going to show you how you can handle some of these colors here, okay? So let me just go to InDesign. All right, so here I am in InDesign, okay? And I want to show you, so like this was another diagram I was working on, right? So this is this diagram here, right? There it is. This is this diagram here. So let's say, like these are my view capture to files, right? And let me just do this, right? So like, you're going to have this problem, right? Where you have like this white background. So if you overlap it, because if it was transparent, you can overlap it easily. But because you have this white background, it's blocking the diagram beneath it. All you got to do is just select whichever ones are overlapping, and then go to your effects. If you can't find it, just go to Windows and Effects, okay? And just do multiply, and that's it. You see, and like nothing will happen to the actual color, you see? So if I go here and make this like the normal layering, there's absolutely no difference between this and this. And that's all. You don't have to take it to Photoshop and like, you don't have to take it to Photoshop at all. Like you can just do the multiply layering. I personally like to have colors over my diagrams, right? So like, for example, let me show you here. Like I have like this very soft magenta behind it just to make it pop, okay? Now, another thing. Let's say like you think that your diagram feels a little too light. You want it to be a little darker. You can just, what I do is I sometimes will just literally copy over it like that. You see? I'll just copy over it if I want it to pop more. And then I might bring down that second copy like down a little bit to have more control, The same thing here. Like let's say this looks a little too light here. I can just Control C, right? And Control Alt Shift V, paste in place, and maybe I want it to like pop more, and like bring it down a little bit, you know? And so I'll show you like final examples of how it looks with the white background with like double diagram layer versus single, you know? Basically, that's basically it. I mean, it's very fast, but I love these diagrams because they have like this really nice, this like tangible aesthetic to it. It's very soft. It's very eye-catching. I'm gonna go ahead and show you some like final exports from InDesign. So if I go here, right? So like these are final exports, right? I will say that if you print PDF, it's gonna be better quality than screenshot, and I'll show you why. So like this is a screenshot, you know? Well, actually, no, I'm kidding. This is a printed PDF. This is actually a great example of why printed PDF is better. So I printed PDF. So you see all of my line edges are pretty clean. There isn't like that many breaks, okay? Maybe right here, you see? But then again, I'm zoomed in literally 800%. Like you're never ever gonna be zoomed in 800%. Like, you know, you're gonna be zoomed out. Like I'm zoomed in, I'm still zoomed in 150%. You can't tell any errors. But this is a printed PDF. Over here are view capture to files. And again, you see how I have a colored background? I just did the multiply layer effect to overlay it, and it doesn't really affect the colors at all. Nothing at all. It just subtracts the weight. Here you see like this is the outline. I think here's like 0.5, but I want to show you something. These are view capture to files. You see that? I think that's like a little unfortunate, but again, I'm zoomed in literally 800%. So in general, it's very fast, very easy to do. Let me just toggle through. I don't know if there you go. Yeah, I think this is these are like the darker ones on a white background, right? It's like on a white. So this one here was on a soft, that's on a white. And again, this one only has one layer of rendering. I didn't duplicate the rendering over it. This one, as you can tell, I duplicated the rendering over it to make it a little bit darker, right? And this is, again, the soft one without a duplicate rendering over it. Right? And it looks awesome, right? Like I think it looks awesome, but and then this is the duplicated rendering with the soft background behind it. So yeah, honestly, that's all there is to it. It's very easy, very quick. You don't have to take it to Illustrator if you don't want to. You can do this all in Rhino. You know, you don't have to do any of that. And so just to go back into Rhino, let me show you this example. So like, you know, surface edges that we checked, right, are these things that you see here. Anything that's a surface edge is this. So if you want to control it in your layers, you can do that, right? So let me just go back here and so we can remind ourselves, right? So if I go to options, right, and I go to objects and I go to surfaces. So like the surface edge settings, right? Width usage, use objects width, right? What that's talking, this is just a reminder. What that's talking about, for example, is like this right here, right? These things. If you have this on a layer, you can go here, right? And you can give it a print width. Right now it's on default, which is basically hairline, right? It's on default. So you can go down here and make it, you know, a little bit thicker if you want to. If you don't want to do that, right? If you don't want to do that, then just make sure that you do pixels and just keep it at 1. Okay, you go to pixels, keep it at 1 if you don't want to do that, okay? Again, now you know why I keep my curves as use objects width, because when I do the mesh outline, I want to control that thickness by the line weight, right? But yeah, I mean, that's all there is to it. So there's another thing there's actually one thing I want to add in here about the gloss and reflectivity. If I draw like a sphere, right? And let me just put it on the correct layer. So do you see how there's like a reflectivity to the sphere here, right? This like slight reflect, because again, I have it on the material setting that I want it on. If I go to my render tab here, the rendering tab, I can change this reflectivity environment if I go down here. So if I go down here and you see use custom environment for reflections, I can like import, right? And use a different one if I wanted to. You can import from environment library. You can use a whole bunch to Rhino. I like to do the Rhino 8 ones, like the Rhino 8 Jewelry Studio or Automotive Studio. Those are the nice ones to use because they're very generic. or even the studio ones are great reflections. But that's just an FYI. But yeah, I hope you found this helpful. I mean, again, it's very easy, very quick. You don't need to do like multiple programs. I only use InDesign just so I can lay it out and do annotations. That's all. Like I just use InDesign so that I can, do my annotations and my text. That's really about it. And so it's very quick versus like, make 2D. Even though that's a process that you can do, and I made videos about that. You can just do everything in Rhino and call it a day. So yeah, if you found this helpful, please, like and subscribe so we can help this channel grow. And if you have any comments or questions, leave them in the comment section below. All right, take care. Thank you.